And live. What up, Knicks Nation? And to Pacers Nation. I know you all been tapping into KFTV since this series has started. Welcome to another game preview. We are previewing game 2 of the New York Knicks and the Indiana Pacers going at it in the Eastern Conference Finals. And who better to help preview game 2? None other than my friend Caitlin Cooper. She is the creator of Basketball She Wrote. We're about to get into the deep analysis here. You know, she's going to break it down all for us. All right, simplify it. That's what she does, man. She does a phenomenal job at it. So make sure to hit that thumbs up button for the squad. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Make sure to stay locked in. Support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. Caitlin, I would ask how you're feeling, but I kind of know, I can only guess. After an electric finish for the Indiana Pacers and a utter collapse, choke job by the New York Knicks, I'm sure you're feeling great today. But how are you doing?
Stunning win. I referred to it as mission improbable in my work today, so I felt pretty good about that one. Felt like you were watching a movie a little bit. I think that certainly some of the blame falls on the Knicks and some of the credit falls to the Pacers as well, so I'm sure we'll get into all that as we also look forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and you mean for covering that Knicks Celtics series, it's very reminiscent of that. And look, while the Knicks choked, collapsed, failed to execute down the stretch of the game, you got to give credit to the Indiana Pacers for even what was probably the most improbable thing to happen with about 5 minutes to go. Aaron Naismith decided to put on his best Klay Thompson impersonation. They got the job done. And so, got to tip the cap to them, even though I hate the Indiana Pacers. Sorry, Caitlin. It's just, heated rivalry, but not too thrilled about it. But it is what it is. We move on to game 2. So let's talk about it. Let's look at it from a Knicks perspective. What did you see from the Knicks? And let's talk about everything they did wrong in the last final frame, just to get over this, because they did a lot of good things in the beginning, but that final 5 minutes is like where everything went to ish. So let's talk about it. What did the Knicks do wrong to give Indy that chance to come back?
On a very surface level, I think they started to play not to lose more than they were continuing to run through the tape to play to win that game. You could see that on some of the possessions that were stalling out a little bit, where I felt like they still could have been hitting the gas a little more. Aside of that, inside of like cliches here, there was a lot of confused and ineffective pick and roll coverages down the stretch, in particular, especially with some of the stuff that Neesmith was doing. I talked about it today. He, prior to last night, was 1 of 4 on dribble threes. Last season in the playoffs, he shot 1 of 10 on dribble threes. During
Mm.
the regular season, 85% of his 3-point attempts were without a dribble. So I was kind of looking at it headed into the playoffs and wondering, like, would his 3-point percentages be able to hold? Because he did have a drop off last year when teams started running at him more and he saw more flyby closeouts, because he doesn't really have the ability to always recapture his rhythm with a 1 dribble 3. Last night, he's coming off of pin downs, throwing the ball ahead of himself along the 3-point arc, hitting some pull-ups off of pitch actions from Pascal Siakam, and I call it the switch pocket. That's something that Tyrese used to hunt a lot in his ability to hit the pull-up 3. It's that little bit of space when one defender's trading the next defender off to the other. The switch pocket was massive for the New York Knicks on some of those shots, where the defender receiving Neesmith needed to be much higher up at the level of the screen. Other screen coverage issues, I'm sure you guys know from Karl-Anthony Towns, where they're giving up screen rejections pretty easily to Tyrese Halliburton, which is his #1 attack method when he's in the pick and roll, that allowed him to get in downhill and force some emergency rotations with some of the finishes he had. And then, when they went away from Karl-Anthony Towns and started playing Mitchell Robinson solely at the 5, the Pacers adapted to that with some of the other lineups that they used, playing the guards in the middle of the floor, spacing their bigs to the corners, which put him in some tough spots at well. He even had some coverage breakdowns similar to what Cat did, including on the final sideline out of bounds play. So I think that was part of it. And then just Jalen Brunson, obviously a spectacular game for him through most of the game. But in his defense, given the load that he was expected to carry offensively, and also in addition to what the Pacers were doing defensively to target him, I felt like even on that last step back that Nembhard contested, it just looked like he was running on empty, similar to the rest of the Knicks team by that point in time. So I guess that probably sums it up as what led to the meltdown there in the last 5 minutes or so from the Knicks.
Yeah, and look, I mean, you could definitely see the exhaustion just by the way they were trying to execute down the stretch of that game, right? I mean, the amount of times that the Knicks were just offering it to the Indiana Pacers to say, "Here, just take the game, take the inbound pass, take the jump pass as I'm flying out of bounds." Like there were so many opportunities for the Pacers to get a steal. Obviously, what we saw was just Aaron Naismith, as I said, just go nuclear from downtown. And I think the biggest thing for me is the coverage on three, where just seeing Cat and drop coverage in the final stretch of that game just didn't make any sense. Halliburton's knocking down threes. You have Aaron Naismith, who is now shooting 54% from downtown. I know it just took a massive leap after, quite a excellent fourth quarter performance from him. But this is a guy that you had to be worried about entering this game. And just the Pacers in general. I mean, this is a high octane offense. They're able to knock down threes at a good clip. And so I was just a little disappointed that what we were doing against Boston, we did not translate to the Indiana Pacers, which is do a little bit more switching, make sure that no one's like dropping too far back in coverage, and just playing at the level. And that was to me like one of the biggest head scratchers in yesterday's game. I don't know. Is that something that you took away? I mean, as well.
There were some occasions where they were attempting to switch. It's just that the switch wasn't up at the level to receive it. It had to be watertight. And, the Celtics, which I pointed out, one of the reasons I felt optimal about this for the Pacers headed into it is in game five, the one game that they ended up winning when Tatum was out, the way that the Celtics attacked the Knicks switching was reminiscent of the way that the Pacers already readily play. So, there's a lot of stack actions, a lot of ghost actions to open up double gaps, a lot of ghost actions to create hesitations. The Knicks, for all the many things that they do well and finish third in the East doing, they weren't a team that readily switched during the regular season. That isn't something that Tom Thibodeau had them doing. So when you get into the playoff situation and now you're coming at a team who's connecting one action to the next action very readily, all with momentum, that's tougher to switch than just a stagnant isolation that's leading to, a 16-foot shot from Jason Tatum or a 16-foot shot from Jaylen Brown where OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges can really load up in the gaps. So it's a lot more to account for. The Pacers, number one team in passes per 100 possessions. They're rapidly moving the ball. You could see that late in the same, like I said, they put Mitchell Robinson out there. The Pacers deliberately put him in the ball side corner. They ran 3 guard actions between Nesmith, Nembhard, and Halliburton hunting Jalen Brunson. And as soon as they got past Jalen Brunson, they're drawing the next defender, and it's an extra pass, another extra pass, drawing an indirect closeout. Mitchell Robinson coming off the corner, and now Obi Toppin's getting a putback dunk. It's just a lot more to account for. So even if they had gone to full out switching 1 through 5, I still think there would have been some of those types of issues, especially just from what I had seen in that one game against Boston. Although it did improve for the Knicks in Game 6, obviously, with the commanding win that they got at home in Madison Square Garden.
Now, I know you're not trying to give us the entire playbook and help Tom Thibodeau out over here, okay? But what would be the solution then for like a Knicks team? Is it just not having the personnel with the speed to keep up with this type of switching? Like, what would be the response then to what the Pacers are doing, just because they run so many actions in a set?
I think some of it's probably going to go back to lineup flexibility a little bit because I think, like with Tyrese in particular, we'll see what Tom Thibodeau is willing to do as the series goes on. He made adjustments last year in the semifinals, so I expect that everything will be on the table. If I were them, I would like Deuce McBride probably playing with the 4 regular starters a little bit more, simply
Mm.
because he can pick up Tyrese Halliburton full court. You might have to fight fire with fire. The Pacers are applying a lot of full court pressure, which is contributing, I'm sure, to what went on with Jalen Brunson late in the fourth quarter, along with the rest of the Knicks starters. And if he can face guard Tyrese and you can, push some of that action into other options, the Knicks were good at times in the first half at denying and the Pacers' ability to get the ball from side to side, cutting off actions that are literally called like two sides for the Pacers where they want to get that swing. If you can do a little bit more of the face guarding with him, because Tyrese is a guy too that likes to play, he likes to gather low, and that works better against bigger players that defend him. And when he gets guarded by a smaller player, that forces him to have to gather high, and he has been a little bit more adaptable and versatile with what gathers he uses now that he's been fully healthy toward the back end of this season. But that's not his go-to more natural thing, which pairs pretty well against Deuce McBride too. So you want to face guard him, you want to force him left as much as you can, and then go, weak to switch from there. You obviously have to be up at the level. It's possible you might be able to consider some cross matching with Karl Anthony Towns, although it's tricky because even if you were told, OG Anunoby, well, you go guard Miles Turner and Karl Anthony Towns is going to be on Siakam, then they would just start screening with Siakam. So I think it's tough coverage wise to come up with viable solutions because the Pacers do have a lot of ways to attack opponents.
Yeah, and I think I mean, I guess the next best defense is just to play offense, which was
Yeah.
working very well yesterday. We watched We both saw that Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson were just having their way with whatever the Pacers were throwing at them. And, I look at that these guys are still going to have good games just because didn't really have an answer for these guys as the game wore on. Of course, it just came down to tired legs, miscommunication, fatigue, all that stuff in the final minutes of the game. But I think for the Knicks, if they're going to have any chances to get what we just got out of yesterday, not necessarily expecting another 40-point performance from Brunson, another 30 plus point performance from Cat. Obviously, we need OG and McCall to step up too, but definitely the Knicks offense needs to be there. And I think that's like, even though everyone talked about how the Knicks built to compete with the Celtics, I felt like they brought all these guys together because it is to compete with the Pacers too offensively, since this was the team that knocked them out last year.
I mean, the funny thing is about both of these teams is that neither's necessarily really equipped to do the type of coverage that limits the other team more.
Mm,
Like, the Pacers tried to play it straight up yesterday as they did during the regular season, which is what I expected them to do as the road team. Like, I think that there is some merit to that. Like, they wanted to see, can we get by in a game guarding Karl Anthony Towns with our center? They only exclusively guarded him with centers during the regular season. He averaged 30 and 12 against them. They wanted to see if they'd be able to do that, and it turns out that they could in the end of the game. We'll see if they are able to do that for the rest of the series or if they have to consider a cross match at some point in time, but that's not their usual coverage. That's not something that they're based and used to doing. Similar with the Knicks, switching wasn't their usual coverage during the regular season either, but
right.
that's typically, if you are going to stop the momentum of the pick and roll against the Pacers, you're going to have a better chance with that than what you had mentioned with, Cap further back and drop. The Pacers are going to be more readily to feast against that. So, that puts them in two different spots. As far as Brunson goes, it was kind of almost the same thing with the Pacers too. I mean, like you said, they really couldn't stop him from getting 40. They had issues with Karl Anthony Towns as well, but they tried to guard him by forcing him to guard. So he had to defend 23 picks yesterday. Last year, in the entirety of the 7-game series, he only defended 32 against the Pacers. That
Mm.
wasn't something they regularly did because he was more often guarding Nemhard. That's a different calculus now because a lot more of the offense has in fact tilted to Nemhard to be running more pick and roll because of how many teams in the playoffs have face guarded Tyrese. Therefore, Jalen Brunson is now on Aaron Nesmith, and we kind of saw what the impact of that was. They used Aaron much more as a screener than they did at the beginning of the regular season when Brunson was guarding him. So for the Pacers, there's a little bit more of a different type of an attack where they're not just calling one guy singularly up into the action. A lot of times for Brunson, unfortunately, it was like, we're going to pull him through a pin down into a handoff, and if that gets faked and denied, then we're going to automatically go into a ball screen action, and it's flowing from one to the next. So that's what they attempted to do. They obviously weren't as successful with their actual guarding of him at the other end of the floor, similarly to what was going on with the Knicks. So in some ways, I think that this series is going to be a lot of, fighting fire with fire, a lot of offense versus offense.
That should be a lot of fun. That should definitely be a lot of fun. Fire with fire. Salute to Knicks Nation. Thank you all for tuning for another game preview. With me on the other side is my friend Caitlin Cooper. She covers the Indiana Pacers for basketball. She wrote, she does a phenomenal job. Make sure to give her a follow. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for the squad. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Now, I know that it's going to be a lot of fighting fire with fire. So are you saying that there's just no answer for like what the Pacers are going to try to do to slow them down? So we should just expect these like high octane performances from Cat and Brunson.
I mean, I don't think that there is going to be a such thing as a Brunson stopper or a Cat stopper on this roster. I don't think
Hmm.
that the Pacers have, the silver bullet answers as with regard to the Knicks' two principles. That being said, when I watched back the film, like for instance, the Pacers tried a lot of different options against Brunson. I think some of that was searching. I think some of it was also like we know he's too good. We don't want to feed him a steady diet of the exact same defender over and over and over again. However, I wouldn't go back to TJ McConnell on him again. His point of attack defense has seen a little bit of a drop off this season by comparison to last. I probably wouldn't look at Benedict Mathern again. It was a little bit too easy where Brunson was getting downhill out of stack out actions all the way with his left, whereas against Ben Shepherd, it was at least a few more step backs to his right. Obviously, Brunson's capable of making those shots, but if you're the Pacers and you have to live with one of them, I think you're a little bit more comfortable, hopefully, with the pullback rather than the shots right directly at the rim that he was getting against some of the other options. So I think they can toy around with that. They had a little bit of success when Mitchell Robinson wasn't on the floor, mixing in a few timely doubles against some bully drives, but that was just a couple possessions. They don't want to do that a lot, obviously. Going to be vulnerable glass, as we saw pretty readily there. And then, I think they have it in their back pocket if they need to dry it, that they could look at cross matching Nesmith onto Karl Anthony Towns, which was something that I wrote about as, and I know that that probably sounds silly to some, but Nesmith started for almost a year for the Pacers. And the one thing that I like about that is if Nembhard's picking Brunson up for it, that prevents Nesmith from perhaps getting into as much foul trouble. And then when Cat comes to set the screen, Nesmith's link switches back onto Brunson. Nembhard then gets scrammed out by Miles Turner if you put Miles Turner on Josh Hart. That's something that they could look at, but I don't think that they will look at it until they absolutely need to. So I don't know that they would readily just do that in game 2 unless they feel like they need to come out with a different counter. So there are some things that they haven't tried yet, because at least in that case, if you're switching those actions between Brunson and Towns, he's not getting as much momentum downhill. Similarly in the reverse with Tyrese. So there's some things that they haven't tried yet, but like I said, I don't necessarily think that they have, unless, Jarris Walker's another option too, but like they don't have some of the clear cut answers that maybe some other opponents against the Knicks might be able to put out on the floor.
Well, there might not be any need to just go to adjustments. Yeah, I mean, it was in stunning fa fashion that they won, but you're still going to try, I guess. And since the Pacers are up 1-0, why not try out the same thing and see what happens in game 2 before you start making major adjustments? Don't fix what is not broke. So let's talk about the Indiana Pacers right now before we start talking about expectations for game 2, what we expect to happen. What did the Pacers do well yesterday? And like what was like the, I guess, the overlying theme that got them to the success that they were able to pull out a win?
I mean, incredible shot making, certainly. Stratospheric shot making, but also a lot of shape shifting. Like I said, they were very willing. That this team, more than anything, is very magnanimous in terms of their stars, that they're willing to get out of each other's way for whatever the best matchup is going to be at the time. Just because the plays for them doesn't mean the shot has to be for them. And you saw that on the last sideline out of bounds play where Obi Toppin got loose, slipping to the rim on that dunk. It was not good coverage by Josh Hart and Mitchell Robinson. Like that was another botched part of the slippage, that collapse, I guess we should say, that was going on for New York during that time. But when you watch that play back, Tyrese and Pascal Siakam were standing on the logo effectively as decoys, which became a 3-on-3, virtually a 3-on-2 for the Indiana Pacers, getting a dunk for Obi. So at the point in time that that play happened, the Pacers were up 1 point with 20 seconds left in overtime. So to see their two stars be willing to do that and have the trust that their three role players would be able to pull that off because of how good Nembhard has been in pick and roll in this playoff run and how good of effective field goal percentage Nesmith has had as a shooter, it just makes them very hard to stop with the different forms that they can readily take on and how willing they are to trust the pass and to trust each other. So that was there. I also think their low turnover rate has been huge pretty much since their midseason turnaround, because they are a team that can give up offensive rebounds. The possession war is everything for them. The phrase that I like to say is the basketball is the most important part of basketball. So the fact that they got out of that game actually attempting more shots than the Knicks, when it felt like Mitchell Robinson was treating their entire bench lineup like bowling pins with the team rebounds that he was able to secure that led to baseline out of bounds plays, in addition to just the outright offensive rebounds that he was grabbing, was a pretty big win for them, I felt, as well. So especially with how much they're passing the ball, the Pacers turned the ball over this small of amount of time. So that, and then they just got a lot of heroics from a lot of different sources. Andrew Nembhard got a couple stops against Brunson. Rick Carlisle was great. I felt like he made tremendous adjustments over roughly the last 12 minutes when the Pacers outscored the Knicks 46-27. Like if that was a quarter of basketball, the Pacers almost scored 50 points, which again, like you could say like good adjustment, Rick. Aaron Nesmith went 6 of 6 from 3, but the positions he was putting people in did put stress on the Knicks defense. And I thought he made some risky, but lineup decisions that definitely paid off. Putting Ben Shepherd out there at the time that he did meant that Nesmith could go to the bench with 4 fouls, meant that Nembhard could go to the bench with 5 fouls, and that they could still be out there when they needed them in overtime, rather than potentially picking up those fouls then. So I thought that they made a lot of good adjustments at the time that they needed to, in addition to, making every three in sight was certainly helpful as well.
I feel like risk taking is going to be the biggest thing in this series for both coaches. I mean, you talked about how Carl just put I'm sorry. He put out Ben Shepherd in those final minutes, right, to save the guys that he needed down the stretch. I feel like Tibbs is gonna have to be doing the same thing too. Not in the sense of like, saving the using, I guess, your bench players to the maximum. Although in yesterday's game he could have done that with McBride and Mitchell Robinson more, just because Brunson did get his fifth foul against TJ McConnell. He was out. You put McBride, Mitch in with OG, Bridges, and Cat,
That
and
stretch
it
was
went on.
so bad
That
for the
stretch was
Pacers. It was so
insane,
bad.
absolutely insane. I'm like, oh, This is we about to have this thing in the bag the way they're
Yeah.
performing. And I was like, we didn't need to put Brunson back in there. And I felt like we discussed this on post game. Like it was a little too early to put Brunson back in because then the Pacers see, oh, Brunson's back out there. He's got 5 fouls. He's not going to be able to foul us. Let's challenge to see what
Yeah.
he's willing to do, and let's see if we can get him to foul out. And so I feel like that's kind of you talk about Carlisle taking risks. Carlisle taking risks. That's where Tibbs should have taken a risk. But like, all right, this OG somehow decided to be, the next coming of Kawhi Leonard during this stretch, and to say, you know what? Let's rely on this. It's working right now. Instead, I get wanting to have your star player back out there, Brunson being one of the most clutch players this season, but sometimes you got to trust what's out there, and so I think he's got to take some risks too. But then getting back to the Pacers and what they were doing, like it's just so frustrating because you talk about all the multiple actions that go in there. It's like it's you talk about shape shifting, really is shape shifting. I think that's the most perfect word to use for it because it's like, all right, Halliburton drives, kicks it out. Next thing you know, it's just like it shifts the defense to one side, another side, and goes all over the place. And it's like watching the blob, you know what I mean? That movie where you just see it's just like there's no real structure to it. And it's like, how are you able to maintain that? And we already discussed a little bit, but like the Knicks who are it's just a lot of quickness that's just to keep up with all those guys, it's just gonna be very tough. So I'm just curious how the Knicks are gonna be able to do that. I know you mentioned Deuce McBride, but I just feel like the Pacers are just gonna be continue just to like get downhill and do what they do best, and it's just gonna be a true scoring affair for both these teams.
Yeah, I mean the thing that when they kept with the same starting lineup there in overtime, a possession that stood out is the Knicks got the switch that they wanted. They ran a wedge roll and got Miles Turner on Jalen Brunson on the perimeter, Neesmith on Karl Anthony Towns in the post, and when Brunson threw it into Karl Anthony Towns in the post, Miles dropped down to double, and the entire defense loaded off of Josh Hart in the weak side corner. OG attempted to cut. Nemhard went with the cutter. Cat threw it to Josh Hart in the corner, and that's a missed three. Like, I know that there's been games where Josh Hart will make those shots, but the defense wasn't respecting it. They were flooding completely strong side, which to me, if I'm watching back that film, it would give me it would strengthen my position that hey, maybe we can try a few possessions of a wing on Karl Anthony Towns in this series if we know we can load up and force him to make the longest pass, and we can probably recover with even somewhat of a short closeout against Josh Hart when he's out there. That's harder to do if it's Deuce McBride, in my opinion. Now, if you play Deuce McBride, that might shake some things loose for Pascal Siakam in ways that hasn't necessarily been out there when OG and Josh Hart are switching most of the stuff that involves Siakam in the way that OG and Mikal Bridges are loading up in the gaps towards Siakam on a lot of his catches. But I still think that's probably the most logical adjustment that the Knicks could make mid-series that might impact the Pacers on both ends of the floor in terms of what they're able to do. Similar to, we'll see how long it is until the Pacers blink on who they're guarding with Karl Anthony Towns, or at the very least, if you're going to continue to guard him with centers, which I understand why they did it in game one and it paid off for them in the end, not that specific matchup, but in the sense that they won. Please close out to his right hand. Like, please. Like, I don't know why every time they were closing out on him as a shooter, it was just giving him a wide open drive to the right. That's been a frustration during the regular season as well. But I think that those are the two biggest things that both coaches have in their back pockets. It's just going to be a matter of which one's willing to actually do it, which, I mean, the Pacers used to use that type of coverage. They went away from it for several reasons. Tom Thibodeau did go to that lineup last year in the semifinals, and it did affect some things for the Pacers in Game 5 last year. We shall see.
We shall see indeed. Salute to Knicks Station. Thank you all for tuning for another game preview. We were previewing game two of the New York Knicks facing off against the Indiana Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals. With me on the other side is Caitlin Cooper. She covers the Indiana Pacers for basketball. She wrote. Make sure to give it a follow. Make sure to subscribe to her newsletter. Make sure to check out her pod. She does a phenomenal job breaking down the game. Come on, man. We got to make sure that we get all angles of what everyone's thinking about this series. There's only 4 teams left. Come on. I know you all love basketball. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for the squad. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. People, let me tell you why I like Underdog Fantasy. I didn't win yesterday. All right, Kayla, I did not win yesterday. But I like to think I know a little bit more than what Underdog is telling me. So when I log into the app, I'm seeing these numbers. I'm seeing like what they want to do. I think I know a little bit more. So when I go create a ticket, all I got to do is just choose anywhere between 2 to 8 players, and I can mix and match across all leagues. So it could be baseball, NBA, it could be hockey. Can mix and match. That's the cool thing about it. But if you do want to stick to one sport, you got to choose at least 2 players from 2 different teams. Now, when you create your ticket, as I mentioned, you can choose anywhere between 2 to 8 players. The more players you choose, the bigger the reward could be. All you got to do is just choose higher or lower on any stat that they give you. So for tomorrow, they're probably going to give you, let's say they give Halliburton, right? Maybe it's 8.5 assists. Maybe it's Jalen Brunson for 25.5 points. I'd choose higher on both of those things. They're both going to hit. That's how I would go. So all you got to do is just make sure you choose higher or lower on any stat that they give you. And if you don't believe all your picks are going to hit, you can go the insured route. So that way, if you get 3 out of 4 right, maybe 4 out of 5, you still get some money in return. Now, the other part of Underdog Fantasy is that you could put on your GM cap and see if you could assemble the best team possible to either beat your friend or a bunch of randos. All you put down is a little lunch money if that's what you want to do. And then it's a good time. It's a good time. See if you know who's going to perform on any given night. So that's why you should go support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. All right, let's get into the game 2 adjustments now, Caitlin. And starting off, I'm thinking that for the Knicks, just run with that double big lineup. I feel like that double big lineup causes a lot of problems. I don't see like I know you talked about wings can guard Karl Anthony Towns, and wings have been doing a great job this season. Shout out to Fred Katz, who wrote a phenomenal article for The Athletic. Since they played the Horns back in December, teams have recognized that if you put a wing that's capable of defending and being able to close out very well, you can make Cat think twice. Does he want to drive, shoot the three, slows down the offense for the Knicks. And next thing you know, you get them thinking twice, having to reset and do all those things. Since they're not like a team like the Pacers who will consistently run multiple actions to get somebody going. So I don't like, I know that Naismith is a good defender. Maybe Siakam, if he gets switched out onto Towns, he can close out on him, give him a little bit of reach. But I don't see really anybody that's going to stop Towns from shooting threes. And I got to see that yesterday through 2 series between the Pistons and the Celtics. This man has been like MIA from beyond the arc. Yesterday, I was like, oh, thank God. We are now getting 3 pointers, which is the reason we brought this man in here. So that's why I would like to see partially the double big lineup. Also, Mitchell Robinson, much better defender than Cat. And as you already talked about, the man is just moving around everybody, grabbing offensive boards, getting second chance opportunities. I'd like to see more of that as an adjustment for this team because Mitch has only been playing around 20 minutes per game. I need that number to go up. I feel like he's going to be the most impactful player in this series, as he has been the last 2 series.
No, I think that he was the third most concerning player whenever I did the preview. Because the Pacers are so vulnerable on the offensive glass, and not only because they can give up second chance opportunities, but also the best way to limit their pace oftentimes is to crash offensively. The Bucks did not do that at all because Doc Rivers, going back to his time when he coached a championship Celtics team, prefers to send everybody back unless somebody's in the paint. So like if you look at second spectrum's numbers, the Bucks ranked last in the possessions where they sent at least 2 players crashing on the offensive glass. That I felt like they weren't containing the Pacers in fast break, nor were they, you know, uh, getting any second chance opportunities themselves. The teams that crash more actually tend to limit the Pacers' pace a little bit more because they have to stay and box out. And a guy like Mitchell Robinson, it's not only just about boxing him out. He moves multiple players, so if you have to send multiple players to him, that opens up more offensive rebounding opportunities for his other teammates. It also somewhat limits what types of coverages you can play. It makes it harder to trap Jalen Brunson. It makes it harder to trap Karl Anthony Towns because you don't want to create more holes in the glass. It makes it, you're not going to try a couple possessions of zone when he's out there, at least when it's a team like the Pacers where they are as vulnerable as they can be in that spot. I mean, there was a reason why Miles Turner wasn't playing as much in the fourth quarter at the beginning of overtime. It wasn't solely because of the rebounding. He had it was just like, for lack of better terms, he was a little bit jittery at the beginning of the overtime, I felt. And it
Mm.
was kind of like, if neither team can start the other team, you might as well play Obi Toppin out there. And that's in part why this series is so fascinating to me, because it is really a matter of which is going to have more of an impact. Is Mitchell Robinson going to struggle to keep up with the pace if the Pacers are playing Obi Toppin in a Pascal Siakam front court? Or is he going to get so many of the offensive rebounds that it's not viable for the Pacers to play smaller? So far in the playoffs, the Pacers were very successful when the Bucks played double big. They were successful when the Cavs played double big, to the point where Jarrett Allen didn't finish the game in Game 5. But it's a little bit different when Mitchell Robinson ranks, in the 99th percentile of offensive rebounding rate in the playoffs. He's had a very high plus minus. So Yeah, I would look into playing him more. I think he's a matchup issue, although he did have a lot of coverage issues there late in the fourth quarter. The dunk from Obi Toppin on the slip was on him. The putback dunk from Obi Toppin was on him. And then the Pacers were just like, you know what? If we're worried about having to get around you on a switch or dealing with you at the rim, we're just gonna move you out to the corner, which is ultimately what they ended up doing. But I like Mitchell Robinson's fit in this series, and I think that there is a place for them to play double big depending upon who's out there for the Pacers.
For sure. And then when I look at the Pacers, like you mentioned, Obi Toppin, I mean, that's like, and we saw that, as you already mentioned, like the equalizer to like, if we're going to be using strength, let's use our speed. Let's use somebody that can, attack off the perimeter. Somebody who can knock down threes. He had even knocked down threes yesterday, to my
I mean,
recollection.
crazy because the Knicks
Yeah.
bench outshot the Pacers bench. Like, I probably wouldn't have predicted that happening, but Cameron Payne comes in and bangs a couple threes, and TJ McConnell and Benedict Mathurin didn't provide a
We
lot
emptied the
yesterday.
clip,
So
Caitlin. We emptied the clip. That's what's happening around here, okay? We emptied the. I mean, we had a stellar performance from Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, you get when your two stars get 40 points, 35 points, and next thing you know, you even get some threes. This campaign's been quiet since game one of the Detroit Pistons. I've been asking for this guy to be sticking on the bench. Give me some DeLon Wright minutes. Gives you some threes. The next thing I know, I'm like, well, that's not enough. I don't expect him to be doing that again. Maybe he does. Maybe he shocks me. I'd still want DeLon Wright, just more defense out there. So, like you talk about Deuce McBride, like just give me some wingspan, man. Somebody that can just like not get the rock and be like, all right, guys, this is my time to shine. It's like, wait a minute. You got Mikal Bridges, you got Karl Anthony. Why is it you that becomes the number one option for the second unit? So I would like to see that change. But look, I think for the Pacers, like the bench, that's probably like for me, it's like how long will this Knicks team keep up with the Pacers bench? Just because you ran 10 deep yesterday. I mean, we could say that we put out 8 yesterday, but I mean, campaign like he didn't even get the double digits of minutes. I mean, it's really 7.5 that we're playing over here. And so while I know Tibbs is comfortable playing these guys a lot of minutes, I think that's the biggest thing as the series wears on, and even for game two, because while you did get some moments from the bench, as you mentioned, they didn't really go off yet, and that's like kind of like where's that wave coming? Because at some point, even throughout this entire postseason for all teams, it's not necessarily what the stars have been doing, but which role players having that night. And so I'm worried about that.
yeah, the Pacers bench didn't have a good night. I mean, TJ McConnell's kind of slowly. When he hits, he's very, very good because he, ranks among the very best of the best and drives per 100 possessions. He gets paint touches readily. You can normally count on him running pistol. He's probably going to get a kill cut opportunity, but there's also some zero pass possessions. He's going to hold on to the ball for almost as long as possible, gnashing around the rim, trying to put the defense into a swirling machine. And if he gets all the way to the rim and he misses, that's a very fast breakable attempt going in the other direction. And then, like I said, like in all three of these series that they have attempted, like, let's see if TJ McConnell can guard Kevin Porter Jr. Probably not. Let's see if he can guard some of the Cavs guards. Probably not. And then they're like, let's try Benedict Mathurin. At least he's a little bit bigger. And like they got through this very rapidly in last night's game, where it's like, that's probably not an answer either until they ended up looking at Ben Shepherd or they've looked at Jarris Walker in certain situations. So, Mathurin, I think that they still need more of from this point in time. I mean, right now, his most notable thing he's kind of done in the playoffs is getting ejected. So, him having a better outing against the Knicks, this has been a comfortable matchup for him during the regular season. Make quicker decisions, have a little bit more impact on the defensive end, getting up and over and pressing up on screens. That would be helpful. Upgrade on the rebounding front. He's capable of doing that, crashing from the wings, not to the same extent as Josh Hart, but he had a good season as a rebounding wing. Obi Toppin gave them what they needed when he was in the closing lineup to close. Thomas Bryant, they leaned on him a little bit, even over Miles down the stretch, especially when the Knicks were playing double big. But they'll play better than they did in game one, but it is also tougher when your bench isn't going against another team's bench. The bench for the Pacers is going against starters from the Knicks. So if the Knicks can hold up and they're used to playing this level of minutes, that is a dynamic to think about. But because of how much the Pacers put Jalen Brunson through action and how many actions are connected to every action in possessions and how much the Knicks are relying on him to do, carry the sun, the moon, and the stars for them offensively as the heliocentric option. That's going to be a lot to bear over the course of a long series if that's what this turns out to be. So, yeah, I mean, it would be helpful for them if they could play at least an 8-man rotation. They did get to 8. It just wasn't a lot of Cameron Payne last night.
I mean, they brought in DeLon Wright. I was like, ooh, I was a little excited there. It was only for 26 seconds. I was like, well, that was short-lived. So what are the Pacers going to do tomorrow, Kalen? I what is the strategy? Is it trotting back out what they did yesterday, or what's the adjustment that you're expecting them to do tomorrow?
I'll be surprised if they break from what the overall game plan was there in game two. That's been mostly what they did in the playoffs. They played the series against the Bucks pretty similarly to what coverages they used during the regular season. There was quite a bit of change against the Cavs, but then in game one against the Knicks, it was mostly the same. I think that they'll probably stick to that, but they'll more so look at what their execution issues were and hope that they can rely on their bench to produce a little bit better than what they got there. I think it was more so, like I said, there were certain times where it's like, if TJ McConnell is going to get beat and Jalen Brunson breaks the free throw line with his left hand, use a whole bodied stunt, be committed to the help defense that you're sending. Otherwise, it's not that helpful if you're all the way off of, whoever it is at the weak side wing and Jalen Brunson's still getting to the rim. Those little types of coverage type things to clean up. I'm sure that they'll look back at the film and see some corrections that they need to make. Obviously, there's a reason why they were down what they were down in the fourth quarter. And, OG goes on his personal 5-0 run. Don't commit 3-shot fouls. 3-shot fouls are a really, really bad thing in basketball. And they did 2 of those in a row to get into the deficit that they were in the fourth quarter. So there's certainly things that the Pacers need to do better, but I don't expect it to be a significant shift until maybe when they get back home, depending upon how game two goes.
Okay, Pacers going to stick to their game plan. Knicks, I need you to switch. I need more double big lineup and Deuce McBride. I think the thing, like I said, outside of the double big lineup, Deuce McBride's got to be in there. The best lineup I've seen so far from the Knicks this entire postseason, especially against the Celtics, was Brunson, McBride, OG, Bridges, and Mitch. I need a little bit less heart. And look, man, Cat, you want to play those three quarters? Hell, go for it. Go score your offense. I need defense to close this thing out. So hopefully we see more of that, especially with this high octane Indiana Pacers offense. Caitlin, who do you expect to be the guy that you need to have a big performance tomorrow? Is it like Pascal Siakam? Is it someone off the bench? Who is it that you're expecting to have a big game tomorrow?
It would be big if Pascal could do that, because this is, I think, going to be somewhat of a tough matchup for Pascal. You could see that yesterday. And that, if they used him as the screener and got a switch against Brunson, it was an immediate drop down from the next nearest passer from OG. They loaded up on a lot with him. They wouldn't switch things when OG was there, when other screeners, unless it was Josh Hart. Josh Hart was a favorable matchup for Siakam last year in the playoffs because he prefers to guard with an arm bar, which makes it pretty easy when you're somebody who uses a lot of spin moves like Siakam does. But they weren't necessarily getting a lot out of that, and then the Knicks would send a double, so then he was having to play make there. Um, as I said, that the Pacers are magnanimous a lot of times when they play. When they played the Cavs and Dean Wade guarded Siakam in one of the games when Evan Mobley was out, they just didn't go to Siakam a lot because they're like, we don't want to involve Dean Wade as an isolation defender, and Siakam, was pretty okay with that in terms of how he was rearranging and what he does in the intermediary. So if they're thinking this isn't the best possible matchup to be loading a lot of possessions to Siakam, then he needs to be active, continuing to move and opening up opportunities for his teammates, which I think that he did pretty well in the third and fourth quarter. Continue to make an impact defensively. And then I do think that if they want to tilt, a little bit less maybe to TJ, I know Knick fans are probably listening to this and thinking TJ was a killer against us last year, and he was. I just think that he's shown a little bit of slippage over the back end of this season. Then in lineups, if he isn't out there, like what was going on down during the stretch when Rick Carlisle put Ben Shepherd in instead, then maybe he gets used a little bit as a bring up ball handler to open up opportunities like what we saw with some of like the massive switch pocket I was talking about when he was using handoffs to get Neesmith open. I think there's a few different ways that they could deploy him. Certainly he's their other max player, so it's pretty important that they're able to at some point in this series. So he would be a good person to look at in terms of what different things the Pacers try, because he didn't fully get going at any point in time in game one.
Don't sell me short on TJ McConnell, okay? That man, look, he went 4-9 yesterday. He was getting to the free throw line a bit. He had his 4 boards, 2 assists. He came in 14 minutes. Was pretty productive. I don't trust that man's been playing Boston this season. I
No,
swear to it.
when he hits, he's super effective. He puts a ton of pressure on the defense. You have to guard him at all times. But there have been games in these playoffs where he's a little bit off, and his defense doesn't always compensate for that as much as it once did. So
That man's playing possum. I don't believe it. He sees the Knicks and he's like, all right, time to go. Now, I think for the Knicks, like I have Bridges as my X factor for this series just because I feel like for his archetype, the way that he can get to the mid range is just a good way to break what the Pacers do defensively. But for me in tomorrow's game, I need a better outing from OG. I didn't think OG had the crispiest defense yesterday, and then it was like outside of like that stretch in the fourth quarter when Brunson goes out, wasn't really as effective as a shooter either. So I'm going to need him to step up, knock down his threes, be that backdoor cutter that he can be. I know he was finishing through contact a little bit, but yesterday just finishing, what was it, six? Yeah, 6 of 15, 2 of 8 from downtown. And then obviously missing those free throws, those critical free throws. I know he had 16 points, but it's got to be better efficiency from him just as a role player. So I'm looking for more from OG, both offensively and defensively. And I hope he plays with a little bit more gusto tomorrow since he was not in either the first or second team all defense. So hopefully he gets out with a better showing. But Kalen, I appreciate you coming through and helping me preview this game. Please let the listeners know where they can find you if you got any work up and coming we should be on the lookout for.
So my handle on X is at C2_Cooper. You go there, the link to my Patreon's patreon.com/basketball she wrote. I always do writing and breakdowns there throughout the regular season. And then Samson Folk, who is contributing with me for freelance, is doing gamers after every game there that I think are terrific. I think he has a writing style that's different than anybody else's that I know in terms of how he live blogs a game. And then after every game on my YouTube channel, he and I are doing post game breakdowns with film incorporated that I hope people will check out. I readily welcome Knicks fans. We do stuff from both sides to a certain extent. Of course, it is Pacer slanted because that's the team that I cover. But if anybody wants to check it out, you're more than welcome to head over there.
Make sure to give Caitlin that follow. Make sure to subscribe to what she's doing. She does phenomenal work. Come on, we got Ken Sniffy Jr. in here. Be like, Caitlin knows her stuff. How do you not know Caitlin Cooper, man? Come on, no, come on, man. But make sure to give Caitlin that follow. She knows what she's talking about. She does great research. I mean, come on. Even Rick Carl has given her credit, man. That's how you know she's already reached the pinnacle. I would not be surprised if I see you coaching before Becky Hammond, Caitlin, just to be honest with you. So shout out to Caitlin for doing phenomenal work. Shout out to you for coming through and always breaking it down and killing it. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for the squad. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. All right. Make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. People, let's also remember, we got the watch party tomorrow. Let's see. I'm pretty sure it's open at either 5:30 or 6 over at Slate. So make sure to go join the Orange and Blue Faithful. I'm not talking about the Mets. I'm talking about the Knicks. Make sure to get over there so that you can catch Game 2 of the New York Knicks facing the Indiana Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals. This is big, people. The New York Knicks need to bounce back. Must-win game. So make sure to go support and be with your fellow members who root for the New York Knicks. And shout out to some of the franchise channel members in here. We got Timothy Danzo in here. We got The Shell. Shout out to you for being a mod. We got Christopher Blake. Shout out to you, Christopher Blake. We got D Cannon 93. Shout out to you as well. Who else we got in here? We got Zach in LA. Never misses a show. We got Afrik NY. Shout out to you. Nicholas Braxton. Shout out to you. And wait, we got... Is that Kadim? Shout out to you for becoming a franchise channel member. Appreciate you for doing so. And we got Danos in here too. Shout out to Danos. What else we got? Shout out to all the mods too. Appreciate all of you for tapping in. And make sure to tap in tomorrow we got obviously play-by-play and post-game. So make sure to stay tapped in and locked in. Appreciate all.